Hello and welcome to another episode of Love One Life.
We both direct a service called Bridge the Gap, based in Derby. We're a children's mental health service, and we're both incredibly passionate about supporting young people to learn more about emotions, thoughts, behaviours, how they all interlink, and actually finding joy in life. So then basically walked away from everything to create something that would empower parents and young people in order to meet their best long-term outcomes, and I think bring a lot of hope into difficult situations. And then met up with this one because she slid into my email inbox.
You're going to say into something else then.
No, I think DMs is enough, yeah.
When you're working with them and you're talking about the disconnection, you feel, but the young people that you're working with particularly feel disconnected for a variety of reasons.
We talk about there being a mental health crisis, but for me it's a connection crisis.
Did you have that same sense within your own homes as well? Did you feel that?
Yes, in a nutshell. You know, as humans, we need two main things for good mental health: is to feel connected and to feel in control. They're the two biggest things that we need to feel stable.
With the young people that you're working with, and maybe even the parents, is there something that has clicked and has helped in that process that you've seen?
Yeah, stop trying to fix it. That's
Really?
the clip.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Love One Life. I'm Fred, this is Drea, and today's episode is all about how to make some small moments lead to big changes in the lives of yourself, in the lives of children, in the lives of other people. And we're very excited to be joined by Jen and Nikki, who are going to talk about what they do, and then we're going to go into some really amazing content around knowing how to get the best out of life and really enjoying the journey in the process. So with no further ado, Nikki and Jen, please introduce yourselves, tell us what you do.
Well, do you want to go
You.
first or me? You go first. Cheers, hon. Hello. So, yeah, my name's Jennifer. So my background's quite interesting. I come and do what I do from a combination of professional background and lived experience. So my background's in early years education. So very passionate about child development, supporting young people to meet their best outcomes, really, life outcomes. And really, I suppose the lived experience comes right from when I was little, that we had a significant family trauma in my life that really impacted me as a young person. And I wasn't offered the right support in the right space at the right time. So that led to me being quite vulnerable to experiencing more challenges as I grew more complex challenges. So that really stayed with me. But also alongside that, having a sibling with additional needs, that I suppose that impacted me, but also it made me really passionate about helping every child to be the best version of themselves and not underestimating any young person. So yeah, and then in 2014, I specialised in something called emotional literacy, and it changed my life. There's no other way to explain it. It was like someone had struck a match, thrown it in my gut, and there was this passion there that then made it really difficult to work within a system that perhaps I no longer believed in. And that was really challenging. And then at the same time, as a parent, I was going through something really difficult with my eldest child, and he was finding life really difficult. And there was no support out there. It felt really clinical, unadaptable, very short term. So I got quite angry about that, alongside all my passion of child development, emotional literacy, understanding myself, thinking, why didn't I know this sooner? So then basically walked away from everything to create something that would empower parents and young people in order to meet their best long-term outcomes, and I think bring a lot of hope into difficult situations. And then met up with this one because she slid into my email inbox.
You're going to say into something else then.
No, I think DMs is enough, yeah.
Yes. So my background's slightly different to Jen's, but our backgrounds, I would say, really complement each other. We both direct a service called Bridge the Gap, based in Derby. We're a children's mental health service, and we're both incredibly passionate about supporting young people to learn more about emotions, thoughts, behaviours, how they all interlink, and actually finding joy in life and what that life looks like.
So my background is I'm a registered mental health nurse and qualified therapist in something called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is something I'm incredibly passionate about. It's all about living by your values and aligning life with that and finding moments of joy, which we were talking about actually just before this podcast. Even when life is really gloomy, having a cupful approach and finding those tiny pockets of joy, I call them, which is not always easy. So I worked in the NHS as a nurse and a therapist for 16 years from when I qualified. And sadly, within that system, things are very difficult, as you can probably imagine. I nursed through the start of COVID, really found that very tricky, struggled with my own mental health and a lot of anxiety around that time. And it was at that time where I met Jen, and we just clicked because I was really passionate about all these families I was supporting and carers that I was supporting of young people who were struggling. There had been nothing that had taught them before a place where they were really struggling with their mental health. So there was no understanding about what is emotion, how that feels internally, how we're not supposed to be happy all of the time. That doesn't exist. So, but we're not educating our young people in that system. So I was really passionate about creating something that was proactive and preventative to give those families hope, to teach children about those things before they need it. And then I met Jen at the same time as I was struggling with my mental health, and my children were struggling at the time as well. And we just clicked, didn't we? I
did.
cried for the first time within meeting her, within about
I
seconds.
didn't hurt her in any way.
This is a theme. This is a theme with you.
Yes,
I don't know what you mean.
psychological safety, we'll call it, Dre.
You make
But
a lot
yeah,
of
we
people
just
cry, Jen.
aligned.
She does.
I find it a privilege, though. That's the bottom line, is that I'm not uncomfortable with any emotion or topic, and I'm happy to hold a space for those emotions and those feelings. So I think when perhaps like Nikki was working in a system where perhaps there wasn't support for the professional trauma she was experiencing or had experienced,
Exactly
for
that.
all of those, and then she came into my home for a coffee and maybe got that validation, not just for how you were feeling, but also how you were feeling about
the
your
system.
and your children's transitions that they were going through as well.
When you're looking at young people's lives, when you're working with them and you're talking about the disconnection you feel, but the young people that you're working with particularly feel disconnected for a variety of reasons. Do you want to talk us through what that means to the people you're dealing with and you're helping?
We talk about there being a mental health crisis, but for me, it's a connection crisis. I feel like a lot of the young people that we see are disconnected from themselves, from their internal states, from their interoception skills, but also from nature, from the sensory world, and also from other people, especially even from early years, that there's such a disconnect out there. Even going to the supermarket is quite a disconnecting experience. It's not connection fueled in the same way. It's not me, I'm showing my age, but walking to the village and going to the grocers and the butchers and the bakers and having those, observing my mum have those interactions with those people on a regular basis. So I feel like there's so much natural disconnection in the world, and perhaps where they're trying to connect is in ways that aren't necessarily the most helpful for them and their well-being. So it's probably driving that sense of disconnection further. You probably see it different in your therapy sessions.
So you're talking a people disconnection there as well, aren't you? You're talking,
Yeah.
People, perhaps younger people not being as connected with other people physically in terms of speaking to them, perhaps all online. Is that the kind of thing you're seeing?
Yeah, and also non-verbal communication, disconnect from that, because so much of children's and young people's connection and conversations and how they build relationships isn't in person anymore. So especially when we look at that cohort of children that went through COVID, who weren't in school, where education went online, there was so much missed opportunity to support their communication and language skills because it was two-dimensional. And there's so much about feeling the energy of a space and a person that helps to build that sense of connection and belonging. And I think that was missing for a huge period of time for a lot of young people. 100%.
Did you have that same sense within your own homes as well? Did you feel that?
Yes, in a nutshell, as humans, we need two main things for good mental health is to feel connected and to feel in control. They're the two biggest things that we need to feel stable. And I know that in my life, when I feel disconnected, and particularly during COVID, when I was struggling with my mental health at that time, it was because I felt disconnected to family and friends, but also to the environment around me. Everything shifted overnight, didn't it? But even if I've had, if I've had an argument with my partner or one of my children, that's of course going to affect me in my day-to-day work life because I'm feeling disconnected from them. Similarly, if I feel out of control of something, say, I don't know, just a silly example, if the boiler's broken and I can't get it fixed through the winter period, I feel out of control of that, then that again is going to cause an element of uncertainty and make me struggle with my mental health and work. I talk about it a lot within therapy is the milk stool approach, which is basically, imagine a milk stool, you've got 3 legs on that stool, and that makes up life, workplace, family life, whatever that might be for you, different areas. If one of them is out, so if I'm struggling in family life, that's going to topple the stool and make me unsettled and unbalanced. Of course it is. I'm human. So I think for me, disconnection is at the core of why we might struggle. And children, we're seeing that more than ever. As Jen was saying, whether that's because of tech, whether that's because in school systems, we're not able, for whatever reason, we won't get on our soapbox about it, but we're not able to meet every child's needs. Of course, we're not within that environment. So they are therefore feeling disconnected. And there's a lack of curiosity and connection within those classrooms, more so than we've ever seen.
You talk about how you's connected and you just clicked like that. With the people that you're working with the young people that you're working with, and maybe even the parents, is there something that has clicked and has helped in that process that you've seen?
Yeah, stop trying to fix it. That's the
Really?
clip. That's the change, is when you say to parents, it's not your responsibility to try and fix this and make them happy all the time. Like, let's just meet them where they are and let's just take it from there. And you are not on your own with it. And I think that weight being shifted from that parent, one, they feel really connected to us in that moment, but also we're giving them permission to just feel what is happening in this moment so that they can think about what that young person might need to feel connected. Because often when we're struggling, we'll withdraw, so that fuels that sense of disconnection even further. So I think that for me is one of the biggest clicks that I see in parents when we say, okay, and let's stop trying to fix it right now.
That's an amazing piece of information there, and I imagine quite inspiring for people, not just with children, but maybe for themselves, maybe for the people around them, because it reminds me of when people say, you can only control what you can control type scenarios, as I'm sure you always used to helping people with. But the first thing of validating to say where you're at's okay, rather than, and I know probably the parents that struggle are probably continually putting the pressure on to say, this is not okay, you're not okay, this is not okay, you're broken. And for the child, that must be really quite awful.
Heavy.
And it's fear from the adults in that child's life that drives that. It's not because they want to invalidate, it's because this feels incredibly uncomfortable and difficult to see my child experience emotions that I've not even been taught how to accept in myself, how to sit with it and be comfortable with it until it passes, because it's going to pass. All emotions pass. So if I've not got that for myself, being able to hold that space for a child who we love more than ourselves and we would do anything to stop their pain and discomfort, then that is a very strong urge to be able to kind of pull back from.
We actually had a situation like this just, I think, within the past week or so. Is that why you're looking at me? No.
I'm thinking, which situation is
Which
this?
one? Which one of
Which
the
one of the many?
many? Yeah, we had a really similar situation, and it was with regards to me trying to fix a situation which I had a little bit of control with. Like I had the ability to go in and fix this and sort that, and it was the anxiety that I was having in that moment trying to manage all of that. And it was Fred that turned around to me and said, I give you permission. You do not need to fix this at this moment, Andrea. You can stand back. You don't need to do anything here. And that was like an aha moment for me. It's not like I've not had these moments before. I've been through numerous times in this, but actually having somebody turn around to me, like in the way that you turn around to the parents and say that, I just, sat down, breathed properly, and then the wires in my brain started kind of connecting in a different way. And I was like, okay, no, I don't. I don't need to fix this. And the world's not going to end if I don't try and fix this. And they're going to probably solve the problem by themselves. And everything's going to be okay. And it was, and it did, and it was fine. And so I think you're absolutely right that giving somebody permission not to have to fix it, and then for them, the person in the other side, they don't feel broken either. And like you're just in there meddling.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it, like you said, it comes from a good place, doesn't it? But it also comes from us feeling out of control and wanting to make it more certain for ourselves, and that
Yes.
unsettling. I think for me, the same question, that kind of click and that aha moment, is if it's okay for me to use a personal example.
100%.
When I sat through therapy myself, and that was acceptance and commitment therapy, and understood myself better when it came to actually embedding things into my life that mattered. So I'm really passionate about this, so I can go off on one, but living a life that aligns with what actually matters to you, and not this whole highlight reel that you see on social media that is, parents who have perfect houses. I saw one last night. There was a parent who had got in from work, and within 5 minutes, it looked like she'd got this pristine house. And I was just like, no one can live like that. That's impossible. But old me would have really compared myself a lot in that situation, put a lot of pressure and mum guilt on my shoulders from me, and only me really, that I should and I must do certain things and have the house spotless, etc. When I sat through ACT therapy and I understood myself and what matters more, and actually that I value connection, or I value fun in my life, or and I value adventure, and understood those things, not anybody else's that I'm seeing on social media. When I put goals in place to actually live by those things, so I embedded fun moments into my life and I embedded connection into my life a bit more, life just clicked a lot better all of a
It
sudden.
feels good, doesn't it? It feels so good. It's like a little bit of a high. If
Exactly.
I was to relate it, like if you do like breath work, or you breathe properly and suddenly everything feels real nice inside. I get it. That's how it feels, doesn't it?
That whole the acceptance and commitment therapy, I'm quite interested in what it is, and maybe we'll delve into that a little bit more in a minute. Nikki, from the last statement there, that whole comparison piece, and they say that the great famous saying is comparison is the thief of joy, and social media is driving comparison all the time, which makes people feel fundamentally not enough,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is really, really true, and very transparent to help people see, well, actually, this isn't real. And those people often then end up screaming at each other as soon as the camera stops, and they're not happy, and there's all the fake stuff. But there's one thing that also jumped back to earlier was this old proverb of this ancient king, and he was tremendously unhappy. Every situation he was in resistance to, and everything that came along, he'd be, like you say, the boiler's broken, and just been so angry and so angry. And he sent for this wise man who was, great sage, and came along, and he said, you need to help me through and help me not feel this. And the guy went away, and then he came back and he gave the king a ring, and the king looks at the ring and says, what's this? And he says, well, read the inscription. And the inscription said, this too shall pass. And it says, you put it on your finger, and every time you have one of those moments, you hold it and you say to yourself, this too shall pass. The king was quite angry and didn't think this was very helpful. And so proverb went on that eventually he figured it out. But it's that acceptance of a situation first. And then you go back to the young people and talking about, I really feel for kids where their parents don't understand that they are kids. Maybe a 12, 14-year-old, they've got a bunch of hormones going on. They've got this peer-to-peer thing going on. They've got the frontal lobe expansion piece going on that makes their perception different, and it's just they're not being recognized.
I mean, I think you don't know what you don't know as well. And like as a parent, if you're not educated as well about all of that, they don't understand the frontal lobe, maybe they don't understand the science behind it. It just makes you feel even like guiltier because you're like, you don't know how to,
Exactly.
still don't know how to fix it because you're still going your mind because you want to fix and you want to fix the problems.
I think as parents, we put more and more pressure on ourselves and we have natural parent guilt. We're busier than we were ever meant to be, let's be honest. We are all juggling so much, aren't we? And ultimately, emotion is contagious and we are holding that in our homes. So they are, through no fault of ours, sapping that energy from us. And I think we can feel a lot of guilt and pressure around that. And when we strip it back and we slow the pace down a little bit, but we align with what matters, it's ultimately benefiting them and it's modeling to our children and our young people that actually you get passionate about this. That's amazing. It's a little bit about you and you can align life with that. And we talk about us on social media and struggling. Children are consuming all of that. And I never had a phone when I was younger. So they're growing up in a really fast paced, everything at the touch of their fingers world. And they don't have that prefrontal lobe capacity, as you discussed, Fred, and touched on, to make sense of that. So the comparison for them is even greater.
Do you feel that, I suppose, Jen, when you're looking at some of these parents, this fear of what other parents think, this whole peer-to-peer pressure carries on right from we've all been teenagers at some point, and then now they find themselves as parents. And I know I've observed people close to me where they're maybe putting pressure on their children and trying to resolve the kind of situations you intervene in and help in, but the parent's quite afraid of what everyone else thinks, and that adds to the pressure cooker because they're trying to fit in with society, fit in with the next family, member to look more normal in quotation marks. Does that come into play much in your experience?
We do see that a lot. And I think, again, that peer on peer comparison, even amongst parents, is something I've seen my whole career. I think it's ramped up a huge amount in the last sort of 5 to 10 years. What I will say is I think why that happens, it comes back down to those same things. And I think it comes back down to perhaps a lack of self-esteem and true confidence and belief in ourselves. So that let's be honest, before we even have children, we know who they're going to be, don't we? We've decided, right? Or I certainly did. I knew I was going to be this kind of parent. My children were going to be these kind of children. I knew what they definitely wouldn't do. I knew what they definitely would. I knew what I would definitely do. And then you have your children, right? And you're like, oh, so they're so, yeah, oh, these are my children. These are not fictional. These are not a figment of my imagination. These are who I have to parent and raise. And I think there's a disconnect between the idea of parenting and the children we want to have and the children we do have. And that sense of disappointment can be real, and it's okay to feel that. I think that's part of the process to get to that acceptance part. But also, when you're still hanging on to that idea, you're then comparing to other people who are parenting, and that your perception of that is they're parenting the child that you thought you were going to have. But I'll never ever forget one of my best friends said when I was having a moment with mine are both adults now, but when they were young and I was, lost my rag before they went out the door. They weren't putting their shoes on. They were not getting their book bags or all of the usual sort of morning dramas. And I stepped out the door and one of my good friends walked past, and she had 3 and she looked so calm and chilled. And I said to her when we did the school drop off, I said, how do you do it? Like, you looked so calm and I'd had an awful morning. And she said, Jen, what do you think I was doing before I stepped out that front door and shut it behind me? So like we're all walking, we're all going around going, hi, morning, you okay? Yeah, fine, thanks, are you? And we're comparing ourselves to outside the door rather than behind it. And I think that comes down to, that's one element of what it comes down to, but I do think it's something we see a lot for parents. And when we get them in a space together, oh, I'm not the only one. Like, no, mate, you're not the only one, trust me.
Yeah.
I just thought of a funny comparison that when you go camping, and I don't know if you've been camping, but
Yes.
that kind of behind the door moment sometimes gets out in camping. So you'll see people, maybe the parent steps into the tent
Yeah.
and like all happy and polite. They close the tent behind them, and then all hell lets loose inside the tent with them not really thinking.
Yeah.
Everybody on the campsite can hear them screaming at
Yeah.
their kids or their children or what have you. And it's that
Yeah.
kind of, like you say, there's the front and then there's the real person. And the more people understand, and it's great for children to know, isn't it, that I always tell my kids, you know, all the adults are just as flawed as anybody else you can come across. They're all just people trying to find a way, and there's no separation. There's no moment where you become this adult where you've got everything figured. It simply doesn't exist. It's a myth, you know. And I always like saying things like, you know, an 18-year-old is a baby adult. You are becoming a baby grown up at that point. And I sort of refer teenagers as grey swans, don't I? A grey swan, you're as big as me, but you don't know anything yet. You've got a lot to learn about getting through life and
And nor
enjoying
do
it.
you. You know,
Yeah, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
We're all still trying to figure it out until the day you pretty much give up and you're not here anymore. You know,
Yeah.
so
There's a sense of inauthenticity about it all, isn't there, really, when you think about it? And I think that drives that disconnection, that we feel like the interactions potentially we're having with people aren't vulnerable enough for us to really connect with them. And that's okay for us to be, you know, guarded with certain people. You're not going to walk around with your heart wide open. But I think even in our friendships, are we being authentic in those interactions? Are we scared of being judged if we open up and tell them the actual truth about what we're struggling with behind closed doors? And I think that's really important, that we normalize the fact that, exactly like you said, Fred, teenagers are not adults. They are going through one of the biggest developmental spikes since they were toddlers. You know, there is so much they're navigating, and they're navigating it in a crazy world. Like, your teenagers aren't expected to have it all together and have all the answers. You're not doing something wrong as a parent because they're finding those challenges very difficult. They're doing what they're meant to do, which is feeling their feelings and trying to find their feet. And you're doing what you're meant to do, which is just being there for them, steadying the ship and trying to be as calm as possible in those moments of turbulence.
Do you think there's like a generational difference because of social media, because of COVID, because of everything that we've been through? I know that you went through your challenges when you were younger, as you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, Jen, but do you think that when you were allowed to be like a teenager, do you think that everybody was like, oh, she's just being normal? And now we don't think that?
That's an interesting question, actually, Andrea. I've never thought about it. I think there was elements of my mum and dad didn't have the fear for me that perhaps we have now. And I think, in all honesty, like, some more boundaries perhaps would have been nice. So I think there's an element there that is, they were living without that noise around them. So there was an element of, if you don't see it, it's not happening, which I get, by the way. But yeah, I do think it's different for parents today because they're witnessing so much in the news and everything like that.
As parents nowadays, I think we are fed so many different ideas when it comes to parenting that we don't know what to listen to. So when we're delivering a parent session at Bridge the Gap, you're coming at it from two different, you know, if you're lucky enough to have two parents in your household, they're coming at it from different parenting perspectives. So you might have a parent that's parenting in a very authoritative way and a very demanding respect way, or you might have a parent that's listened to the updated research, taken some of that on around more gentle parenting or compassionate parenting, and wants to choose to do that. The communication between those parents might be really difficult to find where we want to parent and what that might look like. But equally, we're fed so many different ideas on social media everywhere. Us being one of them at Bridge the Gap, we're another, you know, we talk about reflective parenting at Bridge the Gap, and that's the style we talk about, is leaning in and trusting your gut as a parent. But we're just another person on social media feeding that narrative. So I think when you first become a parent in this day and age, you don't know what's the right thing to listen to.
Yeah, there's so much information now in comparison to what it was back then. There's so much noise. It's really hard to know what the right thing to do is for you, like the right thing. So it's great. You've got all this information. We've talked about this just recently. It's just like you've got tons of information, you've got tons of knowledge and everything like that. How do you apply it? What do you apply? And then you end up sitting doing nothing and probably just becoming overwhelmed by it, going, I just don't know what the right thing to do is.
I don't think my parents had that noise. So they were just doing the best they could with how it felt for them in the situations they found themselves in. And I don't think there was that comparison with what other people were doing. The only time I ever heard that was actually in relation to my brother, and because he has got different needs. And I think other people had opinions on them. I remember there was an incident with a family member and they said to my dad, I wouldn't let my 12-year-old son talk to me like that. And my dad was like, it's not a 12-year-old son, it's my son. And I know him. And yes, your dad.
Yes, your dad. Yes.
Especially for the time, you're talking like early 80s back then. I do think there was elements of the confidence in who they wanted us to be that perhaps there's without the worry of what that might look like in the same way growing up in this world and parenting in this world. I think they had more confidence. I think they didn't have as much pressure on them. I think they've openly said that to me, is that they were just winging it, comfortably so.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on parents, isn't there? And on the kids to step up. Everybody's trying to be something. And I think we've already touched on earlier that whole the parents and the peer-to-peer pressure on parents, particularly the kind of talk about, Americans say soccer moms, but, we've all been through it where everyone's racing around all weekend. And you think, my parents didn't race around all weekend. They just woke up on a Saturday or Sunday morning and then
We watched TV.
we wandered off outside and I came back later in the day for some tea time, and it's that. So when you look at all this then, and you've done a lot of work with children and with parents, how has it impacted your own lives?
Hugely impacted my parenting in a positive way. Hugely. I think, obviously I've learned a great deal from Jen's background, and I still ask you now, don't I? I messaged her yesterday saying, is it normal for my toddler to spin in circles with his eyes to the corner of his... She was like, yeah, that's completely normal, Nikki. It's child development. It's a schema. I was like, that's great. And we're forever learning. And I think that's something we're really passionate about at Bridge the Gap, is we're never an expert, and this is what we would say to every parent as well listening, is you're never an expert. We're all just muddling through, right? We're all just learning from each other. But for me, in terms of parenting and my knowledge base, what I've chosen to do, and this is my choice as a parent because of the research that I've done around this, is moved away from punishing my children and rewarding them heavily. But that has been a huge shift in my learning and my parenting. And actually, it's enough for us to have strong boundaries in our home and educate our children around what those boundaries are and keeping our children safe with those boundaries. But for me, as a parent, I choose not to punish if they've crossed a boundary, and I choose to educate and have a conversation with them instead. Tell you what, the aha moments from that, with in particular my teenager, it's massive, actually. They're able to understand emotionally how something feels. Not always, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. But they're able to say, I'm starting to become frustrated. I need to be on my own for a bit. And that for me that's huge.
That's massive. What about you, Jen?
Yeah, I think it changed everything for me. I don't think I've got enough words. That spark that was lit, I'm not exaggerating to say it saved lives within my family. I suppose the two biggest shifts are, one, I started to understand myself and heal. So therefore, I wasn't bringing that intergenerational kind of trauma into the space, but also it allowed me to be a very different parent for my children. It allowed me to be someone who they could come to once they learned that I wasn't going to jump in and try and fix it, where they could truly be in that space with me, offload, and I wouldn't try and fix. And because of that, I got honest conversations with them, even if they were comfortable for me. And that honesty allowed me to keep people safe in a way that I never would have had the knowledge, the skills, the emotional understanding or self-awareness to be able to share that with an adult when I was that age. So it's been hugely impactful. It's changed, yes, how I parent, how I practice professionally, but on a much bigger scale, it's changed lives massively within my family unit.
I find that really interesting. I think one of the things in our home as well is this open line of communication, and which is really fostered, and including I I need to hear the words coming from you, even if I don't like them. Even if you think I'm going to think that's a bad thing, say, or that I'm not going to like it, or that anything like that, still say the words, please, like, of your thoughts, because there can be a lot of shrugs and there can be a lot of I don't knows. I don't know how I'm feeling. I don't know. Like, I think you do. I think you do know how you're feeling, but maybe you're scared to say what those words are. And sometimes I'll give out some words that they might want to cling on to. And sometimes they'll be like, no, 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 it's not that. It's that. It kind of gives them another way to verbalize it. And that's been really great for our family, particularly. Sounds to me like you're talking about holding space for them, communication, and giving them the tools in which that they can be open with you. Is that about
Yeah,
right?
and silence has been a huge part of that kind of low demand approach. We spoke about this on a podcast earlier, but this low demand approach, it's not just about the language we use that is low demand, it's also about the spaces we create. And the approach that I took very early on when I was researching with the university around the parent course that we first ever created and delivered was around like just the power of 10, and that being ring fence time, whether it's every day at the same time and place, or if that's not possible, the same time once a week or twice a week, but it's ring fence time that is you're entering their space with them, but there's no demands on it. So I'm not even going to necessarily say anything in that space, but I'm just going to leave it open. And there are eye rolls potentially if you're introducing that at an older age, but
Yeah.
that space is sacred. And I remember a time when my son needed to share, and I created that space. And he told me that every day for like 3 weeks, he was saying, if she's here tomorrow, I'll tell her then. If she's here tomorrow, I'll tell her then. So that silent space, eventually he filled it, but it didn't happen overnight. So I think patience and silence can be powerful in those spaces as well.
Really, really fascinating stuff, that. I know we're going to probably wrap up with a couple of questions in a second. And now, if you're watching or listening to this, please do think about who listening to all this content will benefit. You probably know somebody that's been through a lot of this. Maybe they're a parent, maybe they're a teenager, young adult that will benefit from this. And send them it, share them it, and do please follow and subscribe. If you're a young teenager or a young adult right now, what would be one key bit of advice that you could give that's probably going to touch most people's hearts right now?
For me, definitely teaching them that happiness is just another emotion. It comes and it goes. I'm getting emotional talking about this. It matters, doesn't it? I
Really
think
does.
when you are brought up and you've had difficulties, whether you have or not, life's full of them. We're not all walking around all happy. And I think our teenagers in particular think that that is the case.
That you should be, and that you're defective if you're not.
Yeah.
And
That's
you don't
amazing.
have to be happy all the time.
My next question would be then, assuming then someone is a parent, maybe either a young parent or even a parent dealing with teenagers, been a parent a bit longer. Again, one piece of advice that you would give them and say, it's okay.
I think similar to what Nikki was saying for the young person, it's okay if your child's not happy all the time. Your ability to hold that for them so they're not frightened of the fact that they're not feeling happy is huge. I really like the analogy around we're the pilots. So children are going to hit turbulence. But if the pilot comes over the tannoy and sounds panicky, you're really scared of that turbulence. But if the pilot is there guiding you to a soft landing, you feel held and contained and know that everything's going to be okay. So whether your child is struggling with mood or anxiety, or whether they're small and young and they're struggling with emotional dysregulation, behavior that is challenging us as adults, then they're looking to you to say, how scary actually is this? So my biggest advice to parents would be, like, don't panic, try and be calm. And if you feel like you can't do that, then start there with you and do the work there so that you can hold that space for them and be that pilot.
That's amazing. Where can people find you guys? Where's the best to connect with you, to get more information, to access your services? Please let them know, because they're going to need it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So we have a website, which is www.wearebridgethegap.com. And we are on all of the socials. So we're on Instagram, bridgethegap_CMH, and we're on Facebook at Bridge the Gap. And where else are we? YouTube. We're also
everywhere.
We're everywhere.
I love it. Thank you so much for spending your time today talking about these things, being so vulnerable, being so honest and transparent, not just about other people, but your own stories as well. It's really helpful. It's very inspiring, and especially to know, as whether you're a parent or whether you are a child, that there's people out there who understand and who get it, and that you've got the space for it. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Nikki and Jen, for joining us today. You've been watching Love One Life. I'm Fred. This is Drea. Do please share this episode with someone you know that will benefit. Do subscribe and keep an eye out for the next episode coming out soon.
Bye.